Hi everyone, this is our channel, Meet the Real Story. Please like, share and subscribe.
A suspicious mind can be a gift or a curse, depending on how a person uses it. Lend me your ears and listen to my story. My name is Sasha, and I am 21 years old. I have a suspicious mind. I see an Indian behind every tree. I suspect anyone and everyone of having ulterior motives and designs. If anyone makes any claim, I will research it to determine its veracity. If anyone looks at me, my mind goes through 10 different scenarios of what scheme that person is plotting to take advantage of me. I trust no one. So as you might imagine, I don't have many friends, and I've never had a boyfriend. I just naturally assume all people are two-faced scalawags. So without further ado, I will tell you that one day I was dumbfounded when I realized that I was falling in love with my neighbor Brandon. He was a weird, introverted guy who looked and behaved just like a vampire. Data gathering, you know. I noticed that I never saw him in the daylight, only at nighttime when he went to work. Like me, he didn't have many friends, and he didn't speak much. Everyone I knew agreed that he was definitely a weirdo. But there was something about him I liked. He was my cup of tea. I explored his Facebook page and concocted silly reasons to need to talk to him. We would meet and chat on numerous occasions, and I discovered that he liked me and was watching me too. He asked me to marry him one day, and I accepted immediately. It was difficult persuading my family that he was an okay guy, but I managed to convince them. I felt that he had a mysterious streak in his character, some dark secret in his life. But I was attracted to that and was okay with it. We prepared for our wedding reception. I did errands in the mornings and he did errands in the evenings. Then night actually, came when we got married. As we spent more time together, I noticed that Brandon seemed very sensitive to bright lights. If any place were too well lit, he would make up an excuse and ask to leave. I noticed that his face was always pale. I noticed that his room at home had only a small lamp, and he liked his steaks exceedingly rare and bloody. Whenever he happened to see an injury, he would gaze hungrily at the oozing blood, just like I've seen in vampire movies. I truly wondered if he might be an actual vampire. One day I walked into his room, and when he looked up and saw me, his smile was creepy and eerie. I teased him and asked him not to hurt me, and he smiled. He offered to tell me a secret if I promised not to tell anyone. He told me that he had been hiding a dark secret for a long time, and he longed to share it with me. I held my breath. It was coming. He was going to confess to being a vampire. I was crestfallen when he instead told me that he had a rare illness that accounted for his pale face and rendered him sensitive to light. He said he was tired of keeping the secret to himself and felt relieved to have someone to share it with. I hugged him crying and told him that I didn't mind at all. And here I was so sure my husband was a vampire. Am I insane or what? A teacher often serves as a role model for his students. His morality, social conscience, manners, intelligence, personality, emotional savvy, and depth and breadth of knowledge are always on display. If these are all exemplary, he or she gains his students' respect, admiration, and reverence in the hearts. My name is Patty, and I am 17 years old. I am in my senior year at a prestigious secondary school renowned for having excellent teachers in all subjects. I am so proud of my school because they use modern, creative ways to teach in class. When I tell my friends about my school, they, being in lesser quality schools, usually don't believe me. One of our teachers recently gave birth to a new baby and took maternity leave, so our school had to hire a substitute teacher to cover her class in her absence. When he entered our classroom for the first time, we were awestruck by how handsome, intelligent, and elegant he was. All the girls adored him, including myself. I would rarely hear most of his explanations because I would be so focused on his enchanted eyes. Soon, I noticed that he liked me too. I wanted to know more about him, so I explored his Facebook page and concocted silly reasons to need to speak with him. We chatted on numerous occasions. During one such chat, he spontaneously asked me to send him my photo, but I was instantly uneasy with that request. It raised a red flag with me. It seemed creepy and inappropriate. I used the excuse that my mom had forbidden me from sending my picture on my phone, and was shocked when he took offense at my declining to do as he asked. He threatened me, saying that if I didn't send him nude pictures of myself, that he would use Photoshop to create such pictures of me and send them around the school. I was dumbfounded, numb, fearful. I told him we could meet tomorrow and talk some more. He warned me not to tell anyone about our relationship, or else he would ruin my life. I promptly made screenshots of all our previous conversations. I resolved to always turn on my voice recorder app each time right before we would meet again. I succeeded in making him feel relaxed enough that he spoke freely about his feelings and desires. Then I excused myself at some point and told him I had to go home because Mom had wanted me home to go somewhere with her. Instead, I went straight to the police station and told them about this substitute teacher and his indecent requests of me and his threat about ruining my life. I let them listen to our recorded conversations. They said that other students had complained about him before too, but they hadn't been able to get the concrete evidence that I had assembled. He had repeated this routine on different teenage students in several states. When he failed to return to school after I talked to the police that afternoon, I was the only one who knew what had happened to him. A teacher earns the respect of his students and also serves as an exemplary role model. Unfortunately, student adoration of teachers is on the wane in society now. Students owe teachers some degree of loyalty for contributing to their success in life. But what if you discovered that your teacher was on the run from the law? How would you feel? Would you want to know? Lend an ear to my story. I am Erica, and I am 17 years old. I live with my parents and my sister Felicia. My lifelong dream was to excel in all areas of life. I did well in school, and my parents noticed my stellar intellect from an early age. So they encouraged and supported my education in every way. I loved and respected all the teachers who ever taught me. I respected them for their efforts, and I took a dim view of my fellow students who didn't respect them. I even respected the teachers who taught me unimportant subjects. Though I respected all my teachers, past and present, I hadn't yet found any worthy of being a good role model for me to follow until one day a new chemistry teacher, Mr. Franklin, came to our school when our previous teacher resigned to travel abroad with her family. From the very first moment when he first entered the classroom, I was charmed by his charisma. He seemed quiet, self-confident, and venerable. But it wasn't just me. All the students were impressed by his presence. His explanations were much clearer than our previous teachers. With every passing day, I loved him more and more. I had chosen a good role model. I was amazed by his resume qualifications and his erudition and experience. I liked to chat with him on breaks to benefit from his experience, wisdom, and insights. He never indicated that I was an annoyance to him. Instead, he welcomed all my questions openly and cheerfully and shared his knowledge freely. I didn't want to let him down, so I studied very hard. He was so worldly and street smart that we nicknamed him the Thug because he seemed to know exactly how the world operated and how to get around obstacles. We figured he was either an alien from space or a thug wanted by the law. Then one day while browsing the internet, I came upon a strange coincidence. I read about an intelligent serial killer who committed brutal crimes without leaving a trace. Some witnesses had seen him and described him to the police. The resultant face sketches looked exactly like Mr. Franklin, as if he had a twin brother. The first thought that came into my mind was that this was one weird coincidence. When I went to school the next day, I showed him the news article and the sketch of the serial killer. When he saw the sketch, his features darkened. He asked me where I had read this news, and I told him that it was from a news website. He agreed that the similarity between him and the sketch was uncanny, but he seemed unconcerned, disinterested even. I was wondering if Mr. Franklin were to be the killer, what his motivation for killing might be. The next few days strengthened my suspicions when I heard about a murder in our neighborhood, which coincided with a time when Mr. Franklin was not at school. When he subsequently returned to school, he looked worried and nervous. If he were the killer, why would he risk coming back to school? I then began to consider that he might be planning to kill me because I knew his dirty little secret. I had trouble for sleeping for the next few days. Then one day after visiting one of my friends, I was walking home when I sensed that someone was following me. I began walking more quickly, and the footsteps sped up proportionately. Suddenly, I felt a touch on my shoulder. I spun around to see Mr. Franklin. He gestured for me not to speak. I nodded okay. He then told me that he has a brother named Rodriguez, who was actually the serial killer that I had shown him in the news article. He said his brother followed him everywhere to torment him and cause trouble for him. He told me that he had to leave the city, and I was very sad to hear that. He hoped that we would meet again someday. After his disappearance from school, my mind was full of questions. Was he telling the truth? Was he truly innocent? I hope I find out the answers to my questions someday.
Love what you do until you can do what you love. This is a famous quote that inspires people to seek out their dream job. I heard that quote at school before I graduated and entered the working world. What's that, you ask? Was I successful in achieving my dream? Well, I came this close. Let me tell you about it. My name is Max and I'm 19 years old. Poverty and I are intimate friends and constant companions. I live in one of the poorest neighborhoods in my city. Most of the local citizens work at the seaport. The rest of us, we make a living by scavenging through and collecting rubbish. But I wasn't just an ordinary rubbish collector. No, sir, I was a specialist in that field, like my dad before me. Dad taught my brothers and me how to do it expertly. This is how it worked. Factories liked to use recycled materials to reduce the cost of buying new materials, so we would go to the city rubbish pile and separate out materials into different piles, such as plastics, glass bottles, milk cartons, tin cans, and so on. Then we would sell those materials to factories for reuse in making their products. This recycling process saved the factories a ton of money, but unfortunately, that didn't translate into a ton of money for us rubbish collectors. I had a dream one day of opening my own factory and just sitting back and watching the money flow in. When I told Dad that, he told me that good fortune only happens for a select few people. After hearing those words, I went to bed and dreamed about my future factory. Little did I suspect that my dream might actually come true someday. One day after working late collecting rubbish, while on the way home, I suddenly heard voices coming from a large rubbish pile in front of my home. It seemed that people were using that pile as a place of business to sell drugs and booze. An argument was brewing between two groups. Each group were wielding sticks and knives as makeshift weapons. One guy in Group A had a gun and shot someone in Group B, so someone in Group B stabbed gun guy in Group A. After that, a full-on fight ensued, with everyone in both groups joining in the fray. Within minutes, I heard approaching police sirens, which caused the fight to break up and both groups to run away, leaving the bleeding gun guy lying on the sidewalk. I tried to help him by staunching his bleeding. As I was doing so, I noticed a lottery ticket beside him with a letter saying that it was the winning ticket for $1 million payout. I froze. I looked around. No one was watching, so I acted, somewhat ignobly. Then I left quickly. If the police were to arrive and find me with the bleeding man, they might think that I had done it. I rushed home and fell into an easy chair, taking a deep breath of relief. While I was telling Dad about what